This is backwards. Hello. Yeah, back.
Yeah, you can press that button.
Nope. What? Come on.
No. Okay. Sweet.
Yeah. Actually.
You might want to extend that out a bit. It's stable.
First time using this stuff. Not distracted.
It looks very unstable, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Your phone feels like it's gonna fall out.
You'll see. Yeah, but all.
Now's a good time to check people's chats. What they gotta say.
Yeah, some people just said hi. I saw a couple people say hi.
Hello. Konnichiwa. Konnichiwa desu.
Yeah. What the? Come on. I can't. Oh. Shit. Oh. Wait. There we go. Oh, yeah, wow. Oh, I guess so, yeah.
Yo, he got seats right behind the exhibitor.
Yeah. When's that happening?
November. It's usually before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Yeah, she's done some video games that like Kingdom Hearts. Have you been to Anime NYC before?
Yeah, I like it. I usually go because that's where a lot of my friends from school too.
Oh, okay.
There's Virginia, Maryland, DC.
Yeah, I've never actually been to New York at all, so I mean,
it's actually in downtown New York. It's just in the off section, so if you want to go places, you kind of have to like take a day before you put on to like explore.
Okay, sounds good. Alright.
It's also best not to fly directly into New York City. You fly into New York and then take the NJ transit.
Okay. That's it. That is Dan Salvato himself.
Oh yeah, I saw him earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw him at the booth and I'm like, oh, I can't get can't get that well, hopefully it won't autograph me tomorrow. We'll see. That would be funny. Let me see if the books are still up there.
That makes sense. Operates together.
Bro, it's not even 8 and I already want to go to bed. I'm sorry, it's not even 9 and I want to go to bed.
Yeah. Usual sleep time's like between 10 and 11.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
Old people out, help people sleeping hours.
Well, I had to go to sleep earlier since I'm waking up like an hour or two earlier than I normally do.
True, yeah.
So I really don't want to wake up any earlier than I have to.
Okay. Yeah.
First way to piss me off, take my sleep.
I'm not sure if I'll ask him something yet. I'm sure a lot of people are going to go ask him stuff.
Do I get started or am I like waiting for something? I'm not really sure. Okay, I got a thumbs up from the guy in the back, so yeah, I guess we're getting started. It looks completely full in here. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, 5 years out, there's still a lot of really excited people. It looks like. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Woo!
My name is Dan Salvato. I made Doki Doki Literature Club. Thank you. I'm always like a little nervous at the beginning of these. You know, I'll get my groove later on, but I'm not like a really natural speaker. You know, I'm not like one of those charismatic YouTubers or anything like that. But you know, I'll try to do my best. Sometimes I take kind of like long pauses or talk slowly and just letting you know that everything's okay, and that's kind of just the way that I talk. Also got like no presentation or anything like that, and I guess in true ADHD fashion, I'm just gonna be rambling into the mic for like an hour.
Yeah.
I got my notes though. I did the bare minimum. Yeah, well, I guess to get started, I'm curious, how many of you, like in person, actually played DDLC? Feel free to raise your hand. That's quite a few people in here. Okay, how many of you maybe haven't played it, but watched a playthrough of it online? That's still a lot of people as well. And who's like familiar with it, but you know, didn't really play or watch the whole thing? Yeah, there's a few people as well. Yeah, there might be like some spoilers, just kind of warning you. Like,
It's too late.
you know, everyone dies. Let's get that one out of the way. I think back in college, I first got into visual novels. And I played a couple. My first one was Tsukihime.
Yeah. Woo!
I think it's still my favorite. After all this time, I also played Fate Stay Night. I played Zero Escape 999.
Oh, yeah. Wow, all the good shit.
I played Steins Gate. But it was especially the first one. I was depressed for like a week after I played that game. It was just so emotionally impacting, and feeling like, I think feeling like I was more a part of the story was so important to my experience with it. And so I was really enamored by the medium ever since then. I really got into the idea of telling stories in video games that can't be told in other ways. I was a big fan of Portal as well since the game came out, and I think that was a big turning point for me in the way that I perceived video games, because there's not even another person in that game. You know, it's just you and GLaDOS through the speaker. But by the end of it, I was so emotional, and I was like, how did this happen? You know, this is so incredible, and it's really, I think, only a video game that enables that sort of thing, because you're a part of it. You're creating the story as you go. Of course, not all games work that way, but video games are a medium that make that possible. That isn't really possible in any other medium, and so I was just really enamored by that idea, and how visual novels were sort of perfect for that. So I got this idea for a really great visual novel, and I kind of like worked on scripts and, you know, scrapped it several times, and was still working on it diligently for like a year. And then I got another good idea for a visual novel that became Doki Doki Literature Club, and I've been working on this other one for a long time. But then I shared my idea for this visual novel with my friend, who was kind of, you know, supporting me through the process. And I said, you know, it'd be great if you had just like this dating sim that was like as stereotypical and tropey as possible. And then sort of like it just flips around and ends up like the universe is falling apart and like all these horrible things start happening. And she's basically like, yo, you should make that one. Oh. Like, forget this other one that we were working on for like 2 years. Like you got it. And I was like, you know, it is kind of like a more bite-sized project. It's like, it was a very focused idea, you know? And so it did seem like a pretty good idea for a first project. It was a little bit smaller. I'm a big believer in just starting kind of as small as possible and just finding one good idea and executing it as well as you can. And DDLC, it really seems to do that. I also thought it would be good to it would be a solid introduction to visual novels as well, because all these other visual novels out there, they're like these, not all of them, but a lot of the popular ones, you know, like Face Day Night and Steins Gate, they're like these 50-hour games. And it's hard to get people to play those if they're not already like, you know, a gigantic weeb or whatever. True. There's like so much of this wider gaming audience that does not get to experience these stories because they're very long. I saw a tweet, a screenshot a while back of someone who's like picking out anime for your non-anime watching friends is like you have to decide how much anime bullshit that they need to tolerate, like before you can recommend it to them. And that's kind of the way it was with visual novels. It's like no matter where you turn, yeah, you get these amazing stories, but there's still kind of a tropiness, you know? I mean, Steins Gate's a good example. I absolutely love that story, but you still have like, I don't know, like Okabe walking in on the girls in the shower and like stuff like that. It's like traps. I think we've grown to like that's more of an expectation in anime culture, in North American anime culture. But you know, speaking of North American anime culture, one thing that I realized is that we as weebs, we love making fun of anime. You know, as much as we enjoy it, we love making fun of it. And guess what? People who don't watch anime also love making fun of anime. It's something that brings us all together. And so you know, I had this idea for a game that literally invites you to make fun of it. That's the point. And something that weebs can love. It's something that people who don't play visual novels, like the game is kind of just like, come on, like, you know, make stupid jokes about me and, you know, like stream me and make fun of how stupid the game is. And then the game will be making fun of you next. So I think that's that was something I understood kind of before I released the game, that it had this wider appeal, inviting people to make fun of it. The game is very much about specifically Western anime culture in that sense. I think that's something that anime culture in the West, we really capitalize on and we understand. It's kind of like we're a little more sarcastic and have a more multi-layered understanding of the medium, I think. Of course, you know, I was a pretty long time weeb. I watched a lot of anime myself and had a thorough understanding of these tropes. I always had a liking for slice of life anime. I think my first one was K-On! I still really love K-On! So that was quite an inspiration. I think originally imagined Sayori as kind of like Yuri from K-On! A little bit, you know? It's like, sort of like, you know, very goofy, but she knows she's being goofy, you know? She kind of like plays into it. I'll talk about that a little bit later once we get into the characters. And then I also liked Chunibyo a lot. I was always a fan of Kyoto Animation. And then there's these other slice of life shows that I watched, and it was really strange because they just like fell flat for me. You know, the characters, it's like their personality exists for the purpose of punchlines, basically. They're just like a trope, and that's the only thing they speak, and it's like the trope, and then it's like for the purpose of a punchline.
The best friend is Sunahara.
And I gained an understanding of that, and I started getting more opinionated of like what I like in slice of life and what I don't like, and I feel like I had the opportunity to sort of take both of those and put them in DDLC. And ironically, they're both meaningful in that game, you know what I mean? I think that there were some games around the time I was kind of captivated by certain horror games. I never even played that many horror games because I just get scared kind of easily. But I watched like videos on them and stuff like that, and people are studying them, and there's like these other indie horror games, like Yume Nikki it's not really a horror game, but it's like has that weird kind of like uncanniness to it. Yurisu Syndrome was another really weird one that just in reading about it like gave me some inspiration about DDLC, and I realized that something that some of these weirder experimental horror games had in common was that they're sort of playing with the rules of what it means to kind of be a game in the first place. And in the context of DDLC, it being like a visual novel, basically pretending to be an anime dating sim. It's like, how multi-layered can you make that? What does it mean for it to be an anime dating sim? The visual novel interface, and I don't know, the poem minigame, and all these sorts of things. I realize when you're playing these games, they are setting up rules, unspoken rules, about how the game is supposed to work. It's like, you have the scene where you're clicking through the text, you make a choice and something different happens. You play the poem minigame, for example, and even the menus and everything, like the whole time you're playing, you're just absorbing the patterns and the expectations that this game is giving you, and learning the rule set of the way this game is supposed to work. And you can do that for an hour, and then when you start just changing little things, it starts to really freak people out because they didn't even realize that they were learning these rules of the game. And then they start to change, and it's incredibly unnerving and uncanny, and you start to feel disturbed, and you start to feel like you have no idea what the game is going to do next, because the game just demonstrated to you it can do anything. It's not following its own rules. And so in just the most innocuous scenes where there's nothing happening, you just have that unnerving feeling because you have no idea when something strange is going to happen and it's going to break its own rules again. And I think from the perspective of horror, that was one of the things that DDLC was strongest at, if you look at the different, like, you know, scary components of the game, was breaking its own rules in that way. On the technical side, I used a visual novel game engine called Ren'Py, which is Python based. It's open source, and it allows you to not just write your visual novel script, but supplement it with code, you know, Python code, or there's like this animation engine that goes with it. It's very, very powerful, and having access to the source code meant that I could do things that the engine did not really want you to do, which was pretty important for this project. I think it wouldn't really have been possible in any other engine except for Ren'Py, because it just lets you throw whatever Python code at it, and you can do whatever you want. And in fact, I was like submitting bug reports sometimes for Ren'Py. I was like, I went into the source code and I found this like feature called hard pause, and it's not working. Like, I use hard pause and then I can still click through the scene, but I wanted to like not allow you to click through the scene. And the developer Tom was like, this feature has been deprecated for like 4 years, and like, why are you trying to Yeah, it was like a philosophy of Renkai to always allow the player to have control, and that is not DDLC. so I kind of, yeah, I had to make just a couple tiny modifications that allowed me to do what I wanted to. But yeah, taking away control from the player was really important as part of that experience, of course. So, you know, as far as the general development and ideas of it as a horror game and what that means, and the ideas of sort of what to play with and what would be really interesting for people going in looking to make fun of anime, that's kind of what I landed on. But I think with that we can start talking about the characters now. It's probably, you know, one of the most important things about the game, because if we didn't have characters, we couldn't kill them. Who should we start with? Who do you think?
Sayori!
We're starting with Sayori. There's clearly the favorite, best girl, by the way.
Yeah! Yeah!
I mentioned earlier, but Sayori had a little bit of inspiration from Yuri from K-On! I think that one of the things I admired about K-On! Was that the jokes did not feel like, I think especially in the second season, the jokes did not feel like punchlines for the viewer. It felt like the characters were being silly because that's just how they like to be. They're like having fun, you know, and you get to enjoy them having fun and being silly and laugh when they do something silly. And I think Sayori is very much that as well. She's silly because she likes being silly, and like the in-game anime universe doesn't always like laugh at her jokes. Sometimes they play along, sometimes they're like, what's wrong with you? But I think you can tell that she's like being silly, and she kind of, like, she's smarter than the game kind of gives her credit for. It's like she has that sort of airheaded trope or whatever, but you know that she's not like a dumb person or whatever. Of course, the other very important characteristic is that you learn that Sayori has depression, and I think that a lot of people who, you know, email me about their experiences with the game and they talk about Sayori, a lot of people talk about how much her representation of depression like resonated with them based on what they go through or what a friend goes through. And I kind of realized that Sayori not only drew from my own experiences with people close to me, and in some cases myself as far as depression goes, but this is not a trait that just, a character should not be the depression character, you know what I mean? And I think that's oftentimes what we see in media. It's like you take depression or some other neurodivergent trait, and that is like the character's definition. That's like their personality. It's like the whatever the character, the depression character, the ADHD character, the whatever else. And I think just looking back after, you know, this game being out for so many years now, I think the most important part of the way that reveal kind of happens is that it doesn't change who she is. She's the same person, you just understand her a little bit better. And I think that's so important, and that makes the character feel very human. She is her own identity, and you learn she has depression, and that is just part of a whole. Another big part of it was that she's such a happy character, and she's so much fun. You know, how could she have depression? That's not supposed to be what it is. It turns out that those things aren't necessarily directly correlated. Depression isn't just like you're sad all the time, you know. there's so much more, and it manifests itself differently in so many different people. In the case of Sayori, it's about self-worth. She wants to put all of her energy into other people because that is the most that she can do to give her life meaning, I think. And when Sayori commits suicide, there is something incredibly cruel that the game does. And this, I think I had in mind not only realistically what can happen in this situation where someone close to you might commit self-harm, but also more abstractly, it was a statement on the visual novel medium, and that is, the game wants you to feel like you could have done something differently. I think the fact is you did as much as you could, and you were a great friend to Sayori, and you don't deserve to personally shoulder all the burden of what happened. So I think, I like to call it cruel what the game did there, but I think there's also truth to it. It's a parallel to, I think, what people can experience not only in real life, but again, it is. I guess you could say criticizing or satirizing the visual novel medium for just, you make a few choices throughout the game. It's like there's some pivotal choices and you like save a person's life, or you get your happy ending or whatever, just by like making a few simple choices. And it's just so, it's fantasy, you know? And I really wanted to make a statement on that. It was around the time where, after Sayori reveals that she has depression, that's when she starts to feel human. But then the game very cruelly reminds you that it's a game, and these are stupid video game characters, and they're meaningless. And then it doesn't give you a second chance. It forces you into Act 2, where Monica repeatedly reminds you that this is a stupid video game with stupid characters and they shouldn't mean anything.
All the characters so far.
Meanwhile, you're probably still crying about Sayori, and you're trying to grab some redemption from the other characters while things just get worse and worse for them, and Monica's like laughing at their, their mental illness or whatever it may be. It's like this, it's horrible, but I think that it helps you learn more about your relationship with these characters and fictional characters in video games. That's something that was always really important to me. I don't know. We had The Sims when I was younger, and my brother would remove the ladder from the swimming pool and watch them drown. And I always felt so incredibly sad. You know what I mean? It's like I felt sad when I accidentally hit my Animal Crossing town's mate with my net while trying to catch it, and they get angry at me. That made me feel so sad for some reason. And I sort of took notice to this and realized that different people treat these relationships differently. And so this was deliberately an exploration of that, and helping you, I think, explore the way that you feel about these characters. Starting off making fun of these one-dimensional tropes, then realizing that you feel attached to them, and then the game punishes you for feeling attached to them, essentially. That's something that I think just drew from my own experience with video games and these characters. Okay, let's lighten the mood a little bit and move on to Natsuki. Okay, slightly less exciting, but I think she's best girl. You know why? It's because
He's one of those people.
it's because we're not at an anime convention, so you have all these. you know, this is actually my first non-anime convention doing this, and she's always one of the most popular at anime conventions, but then you go to like the more general gamer crowd, like the non-weeaboos, and they're like, oh, Natsuki's so mean, like, I like Yuri. And I'm like, you do not understand. You don't understand. It's called tsundere, first of all. No, but actually, Natsuki was so much fun to write because she is like one of the most outwardly tropey in that sense, like the tsundere trope. It's really easy to write stupid tsundere dialogue because you just like, I don't know, you just make them all huffy for no reason, and it kind of just works itself out. And like, the protagonist just like pokes fun at them a little bit, and then they get all huffy. That's another interesting, by the way, the protagonist, who we're really not going to be talking about, by the way. His personality like changes depending on who he's interacting with, and that was also kind of the point because, you know, he's just a vehicle for the player, and whatever he has to be for like, you know, the club member's titties to fall in your lap is just like whatever it's going to be. So he like pokes fun at Natsuki a little bit, and Natsuki is all tsundere. One thing I realized, I think it kind of happened first with Natsuki, was that I started exploring why these characters have these traits, and I started doing, like, it was supposed to still sort of be one-dimensional because I was working on, the first thing I wrote was like the poem responses when you give them the different poems. But then when you pick Natsuki multiple times and she sort of opens up to you a little bit, you know, you start to learn that like she doesn't have like the greatest social life and friends. It's like she talks about like having a bad day, and like she always kind of badmouths her friends a little bit, saying like, oh, my friends like give me crap for this, or my dad gives me crap for this. And I realized that what I was doing was I was giving her kind of a backstory explanation for why she is so defensive and she gets angry easily, because that's how she was just conditioned to do that. She feels like she has to, just based on what she goes through every day, with her hobbies being criticized so much, and so she has to balance like sort of hiding them, but also like being really defensive about them. It's kind of sad, and I didn't really even intend to do that this early in the process, but I think it just sort of naturally happened again because there are some ties to real life that we can see. So, you know, especially when I was in high school, I saw people with like, their friend groups are just, their thing was like being mean to each other. And I didn't think about that until a little bit later, but, you know, that was like sad to see. That's literally bullying, and we don't see that for what it is because we're a part of it and we think that's just what friends are doing, they're joking around and stuff like that. And I think I drew from those experiences and that understanding in creating that deeper part of Natsuki. And then that's emphasized a little bit in Act 2. Of course, Yuri gets the most attention in Act 2, but Natsuki is like neglected more in Act 2. Like, she keeps getting kind of pushed out of the way by Yuri and by Monica, and that is sort of shares a similar theme with what she goes through, I think, in her daily life. And of course, later on in the DDLC Plus side stories, that is gone into a little bit more detail, and you get to learn more about what she goes through, and her realizing that and trying to get past it, and her own be strong enough to get past it. So that's just something that I thought was interesting and unfolded naturally, that part of Natsuki's personality from this one-dimensional tsundere trope. With that, I think we can move on to Yuri. Yuri is Yuri's best girl. It was pretty similar. What I talked about with Natsuki, I think it was pretty similar with Yuri, where she was also like pretty easy to write. She's this incredibly shy, like always second guesses her interactions and is like afraid of coming off a certain way. Like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to do that. And that also gives the protagonist a little bit of leverage. Like he can be sort of like the more of the active participant in their conversations or relationship, and lead kind of her reactions. And it was pretty similarly. A lot of Yuri's personality traits, I think, were reminiscent of things that I experienced either myself or from other people growing up. Just having maybe having these intense interests that were like seen as cringy. You know, like anime, and not really having someone to share those with, and you start to learn that your intense interests like are too much for some people, and they don't really want to engage with it. So then you kind of learn that you have to sort of hide that, but then it wants to come out, and when it does, you feel self-conscious about it, and I think that's a very, again, real thing that people go through, and that was sort of the basis for Yuri after her character started to develop a little bit. Yuri was also Monika's chosen vehicle in Act 2 to really mess with you, of course. Her obsessive traits were just amplified so much. Monika was really trying to get the player to hate Yuri, so that's sort of why that was happening in Act 2. And I think also Yuri got the most extra character development in DDLC Plus in the side stories, I think, out of everybody. Because I don't think she got a chance to truly shine in the original game. As far as her personality goes, she's just so shy. And then in Act 2, her personality just gets steamrolled by whatever Monika wants to do. I think in DDLC Plus, you get the chance to see her make friends and see the way that she really interacts with and wants to interact with other people. And naturally, that's more recently, that's what's on my mind, because the DDLC Plus content is what I wrote the most recently. I get asked a lot if Yuri is on the spectrum. I think there's people who are on the spectrum who relate so strongly to some of Yuri's behaviors. It's also been speculated for a long time by myself and a lot of people close to me that I'm on the spectrum as well. And I think that there's this theme of me having made observations about either myself or people around me and sort of putting those in the characters. And I think that some of that, like in my own social experiences growing up, or maybe some of my mannerisms or the thoughts that I have, I think I sort of put those into Yuri just as a part of this theme, and maybe there's a connection there. And I didn't even really realize this or think of it, but when people started speaking out and asking me that question, it felt like there was a connection, and that was so interesting. So I just wanted to make mention of that as well. Something really interesting that happened after the game with this character that was sort of maybe something new that I realized about her, along with some other people. And I never really said that because, like, people, especially after the couple of years after the game came out, I think people chilled out a little bit, but there's been so much, people cared so much about, like, the canon. And like, this game restarts itself like 4 times. What are you talking about? Like, what is the canon, you know? But like, I think that's kind of why I never really liked to talk about things like that, because I was worried about my word being taken as like the fact, you know? but as I mentioned, I didn't sit down to like write the character like this. I was never diagnosed with autism, for instance, but maybe there's something there that's just naturally. Again, she's a person. She's a person with personality traits, and if she wants to identify that way, then let her. But she's a person first, and that's how I feel. And I was, I still kind of have fear of that being misconstrued, but I felt that this is a very personal event, and so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it's been so much on my mind, basically. So, yeah, I get to get that off my chest. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Yeah, but anyway, in the interest of time and without further ado, let's talk about Monica. Yeah, of course. She's like the favorite normie character.
Didn't even get the breast roll comment.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah,
back slap.
Monica's okay. I don't think I expected Monica to be like the most popular character, actually, and I think she kind of, like, if you look at the wider audience, she's the most popular character. It makes sense, she's kind of like the main character of the game, and she's kind of an interesting antagonist. I'm going to call her an antagonist because in classic storytelling, that's what you would call her, basically.
I mean, she gets mad. She's not a remorseful option.
I think my inspiration was that in certain visual novels, I guess especially if you look at dating sims, sometimes there's like that last character, like you have to do all the other routes before you do the last route with like the supposedly unattainable character or whatever. It's like kind of a trope. And that's what I wanted to go for. It's like the game tells you up front that like she is sort of there to help guide you to the other. She's like this perfect unattainable character who's helping guide you to the other characters. She's not even in the poem minigame. And of course, right away, there were some people who were interested in Monica the most, and they're like, "Oh, I can't go after Monica here. That's a disappointment." And it's kind of like jokes on you. Actually, can't go after anyone else. But that was sort of like that was the trope role that she was fulfilling. There was basically that like sort of unattainable guide character who maybe in the final round, like you get to attain her.
This feels like Tiger's Dojo.
I think that, of course, the other role that she fulfills in this game, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but Monica, of course, has awareness that this is like a dating sim that is for the sole purpose of the player's fantasy fulfillment. And Monica's mistake is that you see it the same way that she does. Again, it's a stupid video game. It doesn't matter. The characters don't matter. And she tries to attain you, hoping that there's that mutual understanding there, basically. But hopefully at this point you start to care more about the other characters, and that's the irony there. You sort of swap places in that sense. And it gets, of course it gets so bad, it gets to the point that Monica has to pretty much destroy the entire game, kill the other characters, and rewrite the script so that she's the only other character, and you're forced to say yes, and then you're stuck in the room with her forever.
She tells you how to get out.
The third act, when you're stuck in the classroom with Monica, my idea for that was it was sort of the final boss of the game, where she would actually be kind of, like her monologues would be sort of psychologically attacking you. Like pointing out uncomfortable truths about yourself or about the world or whatever, and just to make you feel uncomfortable. It was kind of like a psychological final boss, until you eventually maybe figure out that you can delete her, and then you move on. But I released the game, and a lot of people were like, just didn't want to do that and wanted to like stay with her. And yeah, so that was like, they got their ending, I guess. Like, good for them. And actually, I still kind of can't believe it, but I sort of caved in and like I added, like in an update, I added nicer dialogue for her. Like there's some monologue about her talking about like cuddling up in the rain or something like that. That was like a post-update thing because I just wanted to like throw a bone to these poor souls, basically. But aside from that, I think she has the chance to be the most dynamic character in the game because she breaks free of her trope and becomes like a nuanced. You realize that this horrible thing has happened to her, and she's doing what she's doing in response to that. And then in the very end, she shows remorse because she's supposed to love you, but then she messes with your experience of what you wanted, and she decides that if she really loves you, then she should give you what you want. So it goes back to a normal dating sim, and Monica leaves. Except then it's still not a normal dating sim, and Monica like saves you from additional horrible things by just preventing you from playing the game anymore. And then she sings you a nice song. Yeah, I think we can talk about the music a little bit. Speaking of which, let's see. I probably want to go for like 10 more minutes before, because I want some room for questions as well. But so let's get through the music and then see how much time we have left. I grew up a huge Nintendo fanboy. I just really love Nintendo games, and they have some dang good soundtracks in those games. And I think like what stood out to me the most in my favorite soundtracks and favorite songs is the motifs. I call it like the hummability, the hummable factor of these songs. You just think about like a lot of the Mario games, like Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine, and they take like this one motif, and every song they sort of remix it a little bit, but they keep it there. Animal Crossing does that really, really well, also. And I grew up in the Animal Crossing games. Yoshi's Story does that. Like what people consider to be Yoshi's theme song is from Yoshi's Story, and just every song in that game is like a remix on that. It's this hummable tune that gets caught in your head, and that's kind of the music, the game music that stuck with me the most, and sort of the upbeat nature of that, I think, really inspired me to do something similar with DDLC. So I wrote the theme song first, and then had a couple other songs, and just kept that as a motif through them where I could. And then sometime early on in development, I decided to, do the thing with the end credits song. I can't remember exactly when I decided to do it, but I remember feeling like it was a really good idea to have like the end credits where Monica sings her song for you, and it turns out the theme song was her song all along. And that seemed like, I don't know, when I got hit with that inspiration, it seemed like such a good way to kind of close it out. And it felt like kind of, for a game without really a happy ending, it felt sort of like the best possible closure for Monica to have the chance to tell her story at the end of the game through this song. And you would obviously guess that there's some Portal inspiration there as well. Portal is probably the first song that very famously had like that credits song that was so meaningful to so many people. And that was a huge part of what made me feel so emotional at the end of Portal. And it just felt like a really good fit for DDLC as well. So that's what I ended up going with. Come to think of it, I think part of my inspiration was that I made this, as I said, hummable tune, and for some reason I started like putting words to it in my head to go with the notes. It was like da 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 da, and I'm just like, every day I imagine a future where, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. I should like maybe do something with this. I kind of think that's, again, it was a while ago. I don't have all the pieces put together, but I sort of remember just doing that in my head. Because I couldn't get the damn song out of my head. I've probably heard it a lot more than everybody else, so you have a taste of that maybe. But that's sort of, my inspiration for the music, I think, came from like a lot of these Nintendo games and yeah, that hummable factor. It's still, you know, as I continue to work on new projects, that's still something I really uphold. It's something I really love in soundtracks. I think it goes, you know, even aside from games and movies as well. It's like there's some, I don't know, like Harry Potter and Star Wars. They have these theme songs, and it almost feels like we're not really doing that as much anymore with movies. And like the movie soundtrack is, certain movies have incredible soundtracks, but it feels a lot more like they're there to push everything else that's going on, and not be like, this is the this defines the movie basically. But yeah, you look at, like, for example, Harry Potter and Star Wars, and I don't think you can even think about that movie, like have an image of it in your head without hearing the theme song, and that's really cool to me. And I, you know, want to see more of that, and
Nice.
I want to do more of that. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I have to say about the music. There are a couple more things. I want to talk a little bit about the release of the game. I already had a decent following on social media. I had, I don't know, maybe like around 9,000 Twitter followers, because I was doing other projects. I did a lot of stuff for the Smash games, Super Smash Bros. Melee especially. I was doing a lot of modding and, yeah. Oh, thank you. So yeah, I was a big part of that community. A lot of them knew me better as my former tag, Internet Explorer.
Oh.
And yeah, and so I had a following from that. I knew some people on Twitch as well from the speedrunning scene. I was really big on speedrunning. I also created Phase Z, the Twitch extension, back in like 2014, and so just from speedrunning and from that, like I knew people on Twitch. So I had like, so the release of this game, it's like, you know, of course, it was like an unexpected hit or whatever, but I did do some kind of marketing stuff at the beginning. It didn't just like, I didn't just like plop it on itch.io or whatever and it exploded. I had like, kind of like Twitch streamers who got a couple thousand viewers that I was friends with. I like lined them up and they premiered the game. You know, I had my Twitter followers, and so a week before the game came out, I like hyped everybody up and had daily like teasers on the game's release. It was a secret project. I did not talk about it at all in development, like publicly. It was just the week before it's released, I announced it. Every day had some teaser about it, and then I didn't tell anybody what it was. People are like, oh my god, he's releasing a fighting game. Because like, I'm like in the Smash community, and then yeah, teasing like all these amazing people premiering it. I even had a couple Smash players premiering the game.
Wow.
So then the day finally drops, and it's just like, welcome to the Literature Club, motherfuckers. So even like the game's release was kind of a troll. Is what like, I don't know, I always like wanted to do things that were not totally taken, like I think my idea is that there's the serious side and then there's the like complete satire side. I like being in the area where people cannot tell whether or not to take you seriously. And that like, I mean that showed because, in Smash it showed because I was a Link main in Melee, and then in DDLC it shows because like, that's the point of the game. You know, like, are you supposed to take this seriously? Like, you can play the game for 2 hours and still not know if you're supposed to be taking it seriously or not. And I think that's just the sort of territory that I like to be in, and that was like even the marketing and release of the game. We did that kind of with DDLC Plus as well. You know, if you look at some of the trailer material and the way that we chose to market that game was, everything is just like dating sim marketing, but then the tagline is like, enter the #1 psychological horror experience. And it just doesn't answer anybody's questions, because people have heard of this game and then they see the marketing for this and they're just like, what on earth am I supposed to think about this game? So yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because there was stuff that went into that, and I did have a following ahead of time, and was able to do this marketing push. I was in a pretty fortunate situation, I think. But then it just kept going. And that's the part that I didn't expect, you know? I actually expected to like release this, get a little bit of a following, and then move on and work on like my next visual novel or whatever. But then like all of a sudden, I like the Game Grumps were playing it, and there's like 3 million people on Twitter calling me daddy. And I'm just like, I didn't know like what was going on. Like I lost control of the situation basically, and it was not great for my mental health. Like actually, I would say 2018 and 2019 were the most difficult years of my life because there were so many things that I had to figure out that I never expected I would have to. Just by all metrics, I was supposed to be this extremely successful indie developer, but I was just freaking miserable. And because it felt like everyone's eyes were on me, and there was so much pressure, like all these people wanting to do like merchandise and events, and it was like this big thing, and I wasn't prepared for it. And it felt like I couldn't turn things down without it being like this big missed opportunity. And that was such a terrible feeling because I was still just basically a one-person team, and I couldn't do everything. And for everything I was doing, I couldn't make games, and that kind of sucked, you know what I mean? I just was not prepared to be in that position, and it took years for me to redefine what success means to me and figure out a way that I can put a little bit more focus into what I think I'm best at, which is making video games, and absolutely not like running a business. Thankfully at this point, I have an absolutely amazing team of people I work with. A lot of them are up front right here, actually. So, yeah, that's my personal thank you to them, because it's really more recently that I've been able to put a little bit more focus into, as I said, doing what I'm good at, and that makes me feel really optimistic about the future. I'm spending time being creative in the areas I want to and being able to work on games again, and I know it's been 5 damn years since DDLC's release, and ever since like the month of the game's release, people were asking about the next project because I made a horrible mistake of teasing it like in the Easter eggs in DDLC. But again, as I mentioned, it's because I expected to get right to it after DDLC, and then that didn't happen. Yeah, I think you understand, but things are looking good for the future, and I am working on stuff. You know, I want to do another visual novel. I'm always making, that's just what I do. I get weird ideas and I want to make cool stuff, and you know, it's wherever my brain takes me, and I'm working on some projects for a while. So I think that, yeah, I think in that regard, the future is looking up. We're in a much better spot now, but yeah, it's important for me to just mention what I did, because it was not necessarily a position of envy. There was a lot of my life unexpectedly got worse for a while after DDLC's release, and I know there are a lot of aspiring creators in the crowd, and it's just something to think about. I think what success really means. It's like, do you want like a 6-figure Twitter follower
account?
Yes,
just say that.
Or like, what is it about your game taking off that is the most meaningful to you? That's something that I don't think anyone ever really asked me, and I had to learn the hard way myself. So it's something that's worth thinking about, whatever your fate may be in your own future ambitions. With that, there was less time than I expected. I went a little bit over, so I'm gonna wrap up this part. But yeah, thank you for, again, listening to me ramble into the mic for an hour. I hope that gave you a pretty good idea of sort of what went into the game, what it evolved from, and you know, a lot of the creative thoughts that went into it, what I liked to drew from, the writing process, and all of that. And I am very grateful that after all these years, there are still so many fans who care so much about the game and were able to make it out today and fill this room. So thank you so much. It's really fantastic seeing all of you here. Really appreciate it. We still do have time for a few questions, so are we able to get a mic around and maybe take some questions? There's probably a lot of stuff I didn't touch upon. Or do people line up? I don't know how that works. I guess people are like, okay. Cool. Oh, the mic's not on. They're making it on switch. Oh, I just saw a light go on. I don't hear anything.
Yeah.
You know what? I can hear you.
DLC Plus, a lot more healthy, manageable coping mechanisms for anxiety, depression, and all of that. Was that always the intention to release the DLC Plus with that in mind, or after the initial release, was there then a reaction to, no, I should release these additional stories?
Thank you for asking. Something that happened was, the characters were designed as these one-dimensional they were satire characters, you know? But then people liked them for some reason. No, but actually, like, I realized that, yeah, people were attached to them, and there were things about these characters that meant so much to people. It's almost like, as the years passed, the characters matured with the game and with the fans. They felt more mature, they felt more well-rounded and human just because of the connections that people made with them. And I think you see that even in the key art of DDLC Plus, the characters look older in the trailer art and like all of that. And that was very intentional. It's because these characters grew with the audience, and that really inspired me to write the side stories in that way, to really explore the more nuanced human traits of these characters. It was really, I think, a love letter to the fans for building that relationship with them.
Have you been approached by maybe an anime studio about making anime of Doki Doki? I guess that you would talk about
I don't have a good answer, basically. It's like, because people have, of course, talked about it, and there have been businesses who have talked about it and stuff like that, but it's like, that doesn't mean like someone sat down and is just like, let's do an anime, and I'm just like, okay. It's like there's just I don't know, the sort of business bureaucracy and hierarchy. Like, of course it's come up in conversation. If fans are bringing it up in conversation, of course businesses are going to bring it up in conversation. But that's like pretty much the most that I can say. And yeah, it's come up plenty of times, and the business response is basically, we have nothing to announce, and that's what it is.
would you do it?
What? You're really putting me in this spot? The answer is also I don't know, because you can't just, I talked about this earlier, this story was designed for a game. So if you were to take these characters and put them in an anime, you'd have to do something completely different. And then there's going to be people who are like, oh, it's not the game, and then there'd be other people who are like, who like it, and it would be divisive. But the point is, like, so much very, very specific thought would have to be put into exactly how to handle it. There's just, I can't just say, I don't just want to take my characters and like throw them in an animated series. It's a lot more difficult than that. And I have, this is thought that I've put into it because it has come up so many times, and that's like a real answer.
So, first, I just want to say, I don't know, you're really genuine and, like, inspiring, so I'm really excited to read the game. But, you know Tiffany from Gravity Falls?
Yes.
So, did she help inspire any of it, or is it just, like, coincidence, and what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw an episode while I was already working on the game, and I'm like, oh no. Like, people are gonna think things. That also happened with the anime School Live, where it starts out as a slice of life, then it's like a zombie apocalypse. I watched that like months before the game came out. And in fact, what is it? Yuri made a reference to Stephen King, and I removed that from the game because I was so afraid that people would thought like I copied School Live or something. So yeah, that's kind of where that was basically. It didn't inspire. Maybe while I was working on it, like pushed a couple buttons just because that's what happens when we experience media. But yeah, it was not a direct inspiration, I don't think. This has to be the last question. I'm sorry. It's my fault for going over. But thank you, everybody. All right.
So about the file system gagging the Act 3 and how like this DLC plus changed from something happened outside of the
Yeah.
And I know you're on record as saying you're okay with that, but had DDLC plus not been released on console, if it was a PC exclusive, would you still have made the same choice if you think you missed the file system?
Yeah, if it was a PC exclusive, I probably wouldn't have done that, but we went into it with the idea, like, the idea of the entire game came about from the idea that it was going to be on consoles. And that's why I was comfortable doing it, because if I didn't have a good idea for something cool that we could do, like on consoles, then I wouldn't have done it. And I've said time and time again, during development, after development, that it is technically a different experience. You cannot make it the exact same experience because you're not playing it on a PC and you don't have access to the file system. And we knew that certain fans would say, oh, the original is a better experience, and then other people would have an amazing experience with DDLC+. I was very insistent on not calling it the definitive version of the game. I said that like over and over while we were working on it and talking about marketing and stuff like that, because I don't want to cheapen people's experiences with the original, basically. I just knew that it was a different experience, and we built that with that in mind. But as I mentioned, if I didn't have cool ideas in the first place, then I just wouldn't have done it. I don't think it's a compromise. I think it's a different experience that is hopefully very lovable as well. That's it. Anyone else who wants to ask more questions, I am doing an autograph session tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Serenity Forge booth. So I would love to see you there. I'm also doing another panel on Monday about making video games for retro consoles, like NES, for example. So if you're interested in that, be sure to make that panel as well. Thank you again. I hope to see you at either of those events. It was great to have you come out here.
Later.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you